There exists an invisible colosseum surrounding you at every moment, and you are the gladiator who doesn't realize the fight has already begun. This battleground operates without your consent, without official rules, and certainly without mercy. Every conversation you enter, every room you walk into, every digital footprint you leave behind becomes another data point in a vast, unconscious calculation happening inside the minds of everyone you encounter. They are measuring you, categorizing you, determining your worth in the social economy. And here's the unsettling reality that most people never confront. You have been actively collaborating in your own diminishment. You have been volunteering information, exposing weaknesses, and broadcasting insecurities that strategic minds collect like ammunition. The philosophers of power from ancient Rome to Renaissance Italy understood something that modern self-help culture has dangerously forgotten. The human world is not built on truth or authenticity. It is built on perception and leverage. What people believe about you matters infinitely more than who you actually are. And the moment you give them unrestricted access to your internal landscape, you surrender the single most valuable asset in the game of influence: mystery. The armor you need is not physical, it is behavioral. And today we are going to dismantle the 9 self-sabotaging patterns that have been quietly destroying your authority, your magnetism, and your capacity to command respect in a world that rewards guardedness over openness. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. The invisible architecture of social power operates on principles that contradict almost everything you have been taught about authentic living and emotional honesty. We are raised in an environment that celebrates transparency, that frames vulnerability as courage and openness as integrity. Parents encourage children to share their feelings. Educational systems reward participation and self-expression. And modern therapeutic culture has convinced an entire generation that the path to mental health runs directly through public confession. This is not entirely wrong on an individual psychological level. Processing trauma and expressing emotion are necessary for well-being, but there is a catastrophic error in the application. The private work of healing has been confused with the public performance of weakness. What works in a therapist's office becomes a liability in the marketplace of status, and those who fail to recognize this distinction find themselves perpetually underestimated, overlooked, and outmaneuvered by people who understand that discretion is not repression, it is strategy. The first pattern that destroys your gravitational pull in any environment is the compulsive need to announce your intentions before they materialize into reality. Human beings are wired for narrative completion. We experience a neurochemical reward when we verbalize a goal because our brains partially register the declaration as achievement. This is why telling someone about your plan to start a business, transform your body, leave a toxic relationship, or master a new skill feels so satisfying in the moment. You receive the social validation, the encouraging nods, the verbal support, and your brain releases a small dose of dopamine that mimics the feeling of actual accomplishment. But this premature celebration creates 2 devastating consequences. First, it drains the psychological fuel required to execute the plan. Studies in behavioral psychology have demonstrated that public goal announcement significantly reduces follow-through rates because the satisfaction derived from sharing the goal reduces the motivational tension that would otherwise drive action. Second, and far more dangerous from a Machiavellian perspective, you activate the defense mechanisms of everyone in your ecosystem. The moment you announce you are changing, evolving, or ascending, you trigger a subconscious threat response in the people around you, even those who claim to support you. Your growth implies their stagnation. Your transformation highlights their complacency. Deep in the primitive regions of their brain, they recognize that if you succeed in elevating yourself, the relative status gap between you and them will widen, and status loss, even perceived or hypothetical, is neurologically processed in the same regions as physical pain. They will not consciously sabotage you. Most people are not that self-aware, but they will subtly undermine you through doubt, through skepticism, through reminders of your past failures. They will say they are being realistic or protective, but what they are actually doing is defending their position in the hierarchy. The strategic mind moves in silence, accumulates power in the shadows, and only reveals the outcome when it is irreversible. Have you been guilty of announcing your plans too early? If this is hitting home, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what goal you're keeping silent about from now on. There is something profoundly destabilizing about a person who disappears from the social radar for months and resurfaces completely transformed. No progress photos, no motivational posts, no countdowns or accountability partners, just the undeniable evidence of metamorphosis. This creates a perception of almost supernatural capability because the observer never saw the struggle, the failures, the grinding daily effort. They only see the before and after. And the human mind fills that gap with assumptions of genius, willpower, or secret knowledge. This is the power of concealment. When you work in private, you control the narrative entirely. You are not explaining, justifying, or defending your process. You are simply presenting the finished product. Let your results be the only announcement you make, and watch how the energy in the room shifts when you enter. People will speculate, they will create stories about you, and those stories will almost always be more impressive than the mundane reality of consistent work. That gap between their imagination and your reality is your moat. Protect it. The second catastrophic pattern is the reflexive need to verbalize discomfort, frustration, and hardship to anyone within earshot. Complaining has become so normalized in modern social interaction that it is almost considered a bonding ritual. Co-workers gather around the coffee machine to recite their grievances, friends meet for dinner to catalogue their disappointments, families reunite to compete in misery Olympics about whose life is harder. On the surface, this seems like harmless venting, a pressure release valve for the stress of contemporary existence. But beneath the surface, every complaint you utter in public is a status transaction, and you are always on the losing side of it. When you complain, you broadcast that external circumstances have more control over your state of being than your internal discipline does. You announce that you are reactive rather than proactive, that life is happening to you rather than being shaped by you. But the damage goes deeper than perception, and this is where most people remain dangerously ignorant about the psychological mechanics at play. The human nervous system is equipped with what neuroscientists call mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that action. This is the neurological foundation of empathy, but it is also the mechanism through which emotional states become contagious. When you complain in the presence of others, you are not just describing your negative experience, you are inducing a sympathetic stress response in their nervous system. Their cortisol levels rise, their mood darkens, and their subconscious mind begins to associate your presence with discomfort. Over time, this creates an aversion response. They will avoid you, not because they consciously dislike you, but because their body has learned that proximity to you equals emotional drainage. Meanwhile, you have also reinforced a neural pathway in your own brain. Each time you verbalize a complaint, you strengthen the mental habit of interpreting your circumstances through a lens of victimhood. You train your perception to scan for problems rather than solutions, for obstacles rather than opportunities. This is how complaining becomes an addiction. Each instance provides temporary relief through social commiseration, but it deepens the underlying pattern of helplessness. The Renaissance courts that Machiavelli observed were ruthless laboratories of human behavior, and one lesson emerged with absolute clarity. People are magnetically attracted to strength and instinctively repelled by weakness. This does not mean they lack compassion. It means their admiration and their loyalty flow toward those who demonstrate control, composure, and capability under pressure. The leader who faces catastrophe with a steady hand and a calm voice becomes a legend. The leader who panics, who blames, who publicly unravels becomes a cautionary tale. You must develop what the Stoics called the inner citadel, a fortified core of self that remains undisturbed regardless of external chaos. When turbulence strikes, and it will, your public response should communicate one message: I am handling this. Not through arrogant proclamations, but through measured tone, through strategic silence, through the refusal to scatter your energy into the atmosphere through complaints. If you are enduring hardship, endure it with dignity, process it privately. Let the world see only your resilience, never your desperation. This is not repression, it is refinement. Raw emotion is for the private sphere. Polished composure is for the public stage. If you're learning something valuable here, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Real power is built in silence. The third behavioral vulnerability that announces your weakness to anyone paying attention is the inability to regulate your emotional responses when provoked. Anger, frustration, irritation, these are not inherently destructive emotions. They are signals from your nervous system indicating that a boundary has been violated or a threat has been detected. The problem is not the emotion itself, it is the public display of loss of control. When someone cuts you off in traffic and you erupt into a screaming tantrum, when a colleague makes a subtle jab and you respond with visible rage, when a partner presses a button and you detonate into an emotional explosion, you have done something unforgivable from a strategic standpoint. You have shown exactly where your vulnerabilities are located. Every loss of temper is an intelligence leak. You are broadcasting to the world that this specific type of stimulus can override your executive function and reduce you to a reactive animal. Now imagine you are in competition with someone, professionally, romantically, or socially, and you have witnessed them lose their temper. You now possess a weapon. You know precisely what to say, what to do, or what to imply to make them self-destruct in front of others. You can manipulate them into disqualifying themselves without ever appearing to attack them. This is why emotional regulation is not about being nice or calm. It is about remaining operationally effective. The moment your emotions are externally controlled, you are no longer a free agent. You are a puppet, and the strings are visible to everyone watching. Historical texts on leadership from Sun Tzu to Marcus Aurelius emphasize the same principle. The battle is won or lost inside the mind of the commander before a single sword is drawn. If you cannot govern your internal state, you cannot govern anything external. Power is not loud. Power does not need to yell, to threaten, to posture. In fact, the louder someone becomes, the less powerful they typically are. Volume is compensatory. It is the desperate attempt of someone who feels unheard to force attention through decibels rather than commanding it through presence. And here is where the real psychological warfare begins, because most people misunderstand what intimidation actually looks like. The person who screams when angry is predictable. You know their ceiling. You know their response pattern. They have revealed their limit, and limits can be exploited. But the person who goes silent when provoked, who withdraws their warmth, who looks at you with calm, assessing eyes and says nothing, that person is terrifying. Because you do not know what they are thinking. You do not know what they are planning. You do not know if they are about to forgive you or systematically dismantle your life. That uncertainty is where true power lives. Silence in the face of provocation communicates several things simultaneously. I am not reactive. I am considered. I am not controlled by my emotions, I control them. I am evaluating whether you are worth a response at all. And most devastatingly, I am deciding your fate while you are still talking. This is the posture of judges, of masters, of apex predators. They do not need to raise their voice because their presence alone has already established the hierarchy. Practice the pause. When someone insults you, instead of the immediate counterpunch, let 3 seconds of silence pass. Let them sit in the discomfort of not knowing how you will respond. Let your facial expression remain neutral, almost curious, as if you are observing a fascinating but ultimately irrelevant phenomenon. Then, when you do speak, speak quietly. Make them lean in to hear you. This forces them into a submissive physical posture, and physical posture influences psychological state. You have just flipped the script. They threw the punch, but you controlled the fight. The fourth pattern that hemorrhages your social capital is the epidemic of unnecessary apologies. Contemporary social conditioning, particularly in conflict-avoidant cultures, has pathologized the occupation of space. We apologize for existing, for having needs, for expressing opinions, for making requests. Sorry to bother you. I'm sorry, but I disagree. Sorry for the long email. Sorry for asking. Each of these apologies is a micro-submission, a small genuflection before the perceived authority of others. Individually, they seem harmless. Socially, they even seem polite. But cumulatively, they construct a public identity of someone who believes they are an imposition, a burden, a presence that requires constant justification. The mechanics of status communication are largely nonverbal and linguistic. Anthropologists studying primate hierarchies and human organizational structures have identified consistent patterns. Dominant individuals occupy space without apology. They make requests as statements. They express disagreement as alternative perspective rather than as contrarian challenge. Subordinate individuals compress themselves physically and linguistically. They frame requests as favors. They preface opinions with softening qualifiers. The language of apology is the language of the subordinate. And once you have linguistically positioned yourself below someone, it becomes exponentially harder to claim equal or superior standing later. This does not mean you should become a sociopath incapable of remorse. Genuine wrongdoing deserves genuine apology. If you break a promise, violate a trust, or cause harm through negligence or malice, apologize sincerely, specifically, and once. Then correct the behavior and move forward. But the casual, reflexive apologies that pepper everyday speech must be exterminated. They are verbal tics that communicate insecurity. Replace the apology with gratitude or assertion. Instead of "sorry I'm late," say "thank you for your patience." Instead of "sorry to bother you," say "I have a question" when you have a moment. Do you notice the energy shift? The first positions you as someone who has done wrong and is seeking absolution. The second positions you as someone making a neutral request or acknowledging cooperation. One is a plea. The other is an exchange between equals. When you stop apologizing for your existence, people stop questioning whether you deserve to exist in the space. They accept your presence as a given, and from that foundation, respect can actually be built. The fifth behavior that silently assassinates your position in the social hierarchy is financial transparency, whether you are revealing poverty or flaunting wealth. Money is not just currency, it is a scorecard, a status symbol, and a trigger for the most primitive human emotions: envy, contempt, fear, and desire. Before we continue, let me ask you this. Which of these behaviors have you been unknowingly guilty of? Drop a comment below, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. This channel is about breaking free from the programming that keeps you weak. When you reveal that you are financially struggling, you do not inspire sympathy in the majority of observers. You inspire contempt or pity, both of which are socially lethal. The harsh truth about human social dynamics is that poverty is often interpreted as a moral failing, a lack of intelligence, discipline, or value. This is not fair. It is not accurate. But it is the unconscious calculus that happens in the status-obsessed regions of the human brain. People begin to distance themselves from you, not because they are cruel, but because association with low-status individuals can lower their own perceived status through proximity. You become socially radioactive. Invitations dry up, opportunities vanish, and romantic prospects evaporate because financial struggle signals instability, and instability is a risk. Conversely, when you flaunt your wealth, when you broadcast your designer purchases, your exotic vacations, your financial victories, you activate an even more dangerous response: envy. Envy is not jealousy. Jealousy is the fear of losing what you have. Envy is the desire to destroy what someone else has because you do not have it yourself. It is corrosive, obsessive, and historically, it has been the motivation behind betrayals, sabotage, and even violence. The wealthy who display their abundance too openly do not inspire admiration. They inspire resentment. Their so-called friends begin to undermine them subtly, spreading rumors, hoping for their downfall, taking quiet pleasure in their setbacks. The Machiavellian principle here is elegant. Never outshine the master, and never appear so far beneath the master that you are useless. You want to position yourself in the zone of competence and potential, where people see you as valuable but not threatening, capable but not untouchable. This requires financial ambiguity. Keep your wealth and your struggles behind a veil. If you are building an empire, let the results speak in whispers through the quality of your choices, the caliber of your network, the quiet confidence in your decisions. If you are in a season of difficulty, maintain the appearance of intentionality. Look sharp, act decisively, and give no indication that you are desperate. Desperation is blood in the water, and the sharks will circle. Your financial reality is a private matter, a tactical secret that should be guarded as carefully as military intelligence. The moment you reveal it, you give the world a weapon to either dismiss you or destroy you. The sixth corrosive habit that dismantles respect is participation in gossip, whether as the source or the amplifier. Gossip is the social equivalent of junk food. It is immediately gratifying, widely available, and ultimately poisonous. When you engage in gossip, you may believe you are building rapport with the listener, creating intimacy through shared secrets, or establishing yourself as someone in the know. In reality, you are accomplishing the opposite. You are demonstrating that you are untrustworthy, that you traffic in information carelessly, and that any secret shared with you will eventually become public currency. The psychological effect on the listener is immediate and lasting. Even as they lean in, even as they appear engaged and interested in the gossip you are sharing, a part of their brain is calculating, if this person is willing to betray the confidence of others to me, they will certainly betray my confidence to others. You have disqualified yourself as a trustworthy ally. You have revealed yourself as a liability. But beyond reputation damage, gossip represents a profound strategic error because information is the most valuable resource in any competitive environment. When you gossip, you are giving away intelligence for free, leaking details about others, about situations, about dynamics that could be leveraged for your benefit later. The truly powerful do not contribute to gossip, they collect it. They become the silent repository of everyone else's secrets. They listen, they nod, they ask subtle questions that encourage others to reveal more, and then they retain that information in a mental vault, never to be carelessly disclosed. This creates a terrifying asymmetry of knowledge. You know their vulnerabilities, their conflicts, their hidden agendas, but they do not know that you know, and they certainly do not know what you might know about them. This uncertainty gives you soft power, the ability to influence without overt action, simply because people are aware that crossing you might result in strategic information deployment. Additionally, refusing to speak ill of others, even your genuine enemies, projects an aura of control and magnanimity that is deeply attractive to high-status individuals. It signals that you are not ruled by pettiness, that you are focused on your mission rather than on petty feuds, and that you operate from a position of abundance rather than scarcity. If you must neutralize an opponent, do it through action, through outmaneuvering them in the material world, never through words. Words make you look obsessed and bitter. Silence makes you look unbothered and superior. The landscape of psychological dominance is littered with people who destroyed themselves not through lack of talent, but through lack of discretion. And the pattern we discuss next might be the most culturally reinforced form of self-sabotage in the modern era. The seventh pattern is the public performance of your personal philosophy, moral code, or lifestyle choices. There is a particular kind of person, often someone in the early stages of self-improvement or ideological conversion, who feels an overwhelming compulsion to evangelize. They have discovered stoicism, veganism, minimalism, a new religion, a political framework, or a productivity system, and they become insufferable missionaries for their new truth. They lecture at dinner parties, post manifestos on social media, correct others unsolicited, and frame every conversation as an opportunity to demonstrate their enlightenment. This behavior is counterproductive on multiple levels. First, it is socially alienating. Nobody enjoys being lectured, especially by someone who has just discovered something that others may have already considered and rejected. Second, it creates a public standard that you will inevitably fail to meet. The moment you declare, "I never eat sugar, I always meditate at dawn, I never compromise my principles," you have constructed a glass house, and the world is full of people holding stones. Human beings are inherently inconsistent. Willpower fluctuates, circumstances change, and rigid adherence to any code is statistically unlikely over extended periods. When you publicly commit to a standard and then visibly fail to maintain it, you do not just lose credibility for that specific claim, you lose credibility across all domains. You become known as someone who talks more than they do, someone whose words cannot be trusted. The strategic alternative is embodiment without advertisement. Live your philosophy so completely that it becomes visible through your actions, your health, your demeanor, your results. Let people notice. Let them ask questions. And when they ask, offer a glimpse, not a sermon. The most persuasive argument for any way of life is a life well lived, not an explanation of how to live. When your philosophy is internal and your results are external, you become a mystery worth studying. When your philosophy is loud and your results are inconsistent, you become a hypocrite worth mocking. The eighth pattern that corrodes your gravitational pull in any social ecosystem is the desperate, often unconscious search for external validation. This is the root of almost all self-sabotaging behavior, the deep, aching need to be told that you are good enough, smart enough, attractive enough, valuable enough. It manifests in countless ways. Fishing for compliments, modifying your opinions to match the dominant voice in the room, checking obsessively to see who laughed at your joke, performing acts of generosity, not from genuine compassion, but from the hope of praise, changing your appearance or beliefs or goals based on what you think will make others approve of you. Every single instance of validation seeking is a surrender of sovereignty. You are outsourcing your sense of worth to the subjective, fluctuating, often malicious judgment of others. You are saying, "My internal experience of myself is insufficient. I need you to tell me I am okay." This creates a dependency that others will exploit, either consciously or unconsciously. When people recognize that you need their approval, they have leverage over you. They can withhold it to punish you, grant it to manipulate you, or dangle it to extract compliance from you. You have handed them your leash. The Machiavellian perspective is clear. The prince must be self-contained, autonomous in judgment, immune to the fickle winds of public opinion. He listens to advisors, yes. He gathers intelligence, absolutely. But the final determination of his worth, his direction, and his identity comes from within, not from the crowd. When you stop performing for approval, a strange inversion occurs. People begin performing for yours. Validation is a hierarchical transaction. The person seeking it is low status. The person granting or withholding it is high status. The moment you remove yourself from the seeking position, you automatically elevate into the granting position. People will begin to wonder what you think of them, whether you approve, whether they meet your standards. You have become the judge rather than the judged, and that shift is the essence of social power. And yet, there is one final behavior that might be the most dangerous of all, because modern culture has rebranded it as strength when it is actually a fatal exposure. The ninth and perhaps most culturally controversial pattern is the public revelation of your deepest vulnerabilities, traumas, and psychological shadows. We live in an age that has turned vulnerability into a performance art. Influencers cry on camera. Executives give TED Talks about their mental breakdowns. Strangers overshare their trauma within minutes of meeting. This is marketed as authenticity, as courage, as human connection, and in very specific contexts, with very specific people who have earned deep trust. Vulnerability is indeed the foundation of intimacy. But the public sphere is not that context. The internet is not your therapist. Your workplace is not your support group, and the casual acquaintance you just met is not your confidant. When you bleed your insecurities, your fears, your shame into public spaces, you are not building connection. You are providing reconnaissance. You are handing potential adversaries the exact blueprint they need to destabilize you. If you publicly confess that you have abandonment issues, anyone who wants to control you now knows that the threat of withdrawal is your kryptonite. If you admit that you struggle with imposter syndrome, anyone competing with you knows that undermining your confidence is the fastest path to your collapse. You think you are being brave. The Machiavellian observer thinks you are being foolish. There is a reason that poker players do not show their cards until the hand is over. There is a reason that military strategists do not broadcast their weaknesses to the enemy. Your vulnerabilities are strategic liabilities, and exposing them publicly is the psychological equivalent of going into battle without armor. This does not mean you ignore your wounds. It means you treat them in private. You work with professionals, with trusted intimates, with people who have demonstrated through years of relationship that they will not weaponize your pain. You integrate your shadow in the darkness of your own internal work, and when you emerge into public, you wear the armor of competence. Not fake perfection, but functional strength. The scars can be shown later, once they have healed, once they have become stories of resilience, rather than open wounds begging for sympathy. The leader who says, "I once struggled with this, and here is how I overcame it," is inspiring. The leader who says, "I'm currently drowning in this," is disqualified. Timing is everything. Vulnerability is not weakness, but public vulnerability at the wrong time, with the wrong people, absolutely is. If this resonates with you, smash that subscribe button. The algorithms favor those who engage, and I favor those who are serious about transformation. When you systematically remove these 9 behaviors from your public repertoire, something unsettling happens. You will notice that the social feedback you have relied on for years begins to disappear. People will stop engaging with you in the same way. Conversations will feel different. You will speak less, reveal less, react less, and the people around you will notice. Some will ask if you are okay. Some will accuse you of being distant or cold. Others will become suspicious, wondering what you are hiding or why you have changed. This discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something right. You are disrupting the established patterns of your relationships, and disruption always generates resistance. The people who benefited from your openness, your emotional volatility, your need for approval, they are losing their access to you. You are no longer an open book they can read at will. You are becoming a locked vault, and that scares them because they can no longer predict you, manage you, or manipulate you. This is the isolation that comes with authority. As you ascend in personal power, the crowd thins. Many people are only comfortable with you when you are beneath them or equal to them. When you rise, when you become self-contained and strategic, they feel the status gap widening, and it disturbs them. Let them be disturbed. Your responsibility is not to make others comfortable with your growth. Your responsibility is to become the most effective version of yourself. In that silence, in that refusal to leak your energy into the public space, you are building density. You are collapsing into a point of concentrated power. You stop being everywhere, trying to please everyone, performing for every audience. You become selective, intentional, rare. And rarity is the foundation of value. The person who is always available, always open, always sharing, becomes wallpaper, background noise. The person who is guarded, who appears only when it matters, who speaks only when they have something worth saying, becomes an event. Their presence carries weight because it is not guaranteed. Their words carry impact because they are not diluted by constant chatter. You are learning to become a strategic mystery, and mystery is magnetic. People are naturally drawn to what they cannot fully understand, to what resists easy categorization. By removing the behaviors that make you an open system, you become a closed loop, self-sustaining, self-validating, and therefore infinitely more powerful than the approval-addicted masses around you. But here is the twist that most people are not prepared for. And this is where the real internal work begins that will determine whether you become a master or just another manipulator wearing a mask. Once you have sealed the external leaks, once you have stopped giving the world easy access to your mind and emotions, you are left alone with yourself. The noise of external validation quiets, the distraction of constant social performance fades, and suddenly you are sitting in the throne room of your own consciousness with no one else to blame, no one else to impress, no audience to perform for. And for most people, this is when the real terror begins, because the external chaos was a distraction from the internal chaos. The need to be seen was covering up the fear of seeing yourself. The compulsive talking was filling the silence where your own thoughts would otherwise echo. Now that you have built the fortress, you realize that the fortress contains the very thing you were running from. You, unfiltered, unperformed, undistracted. This is the point where most people retreat. They cannot handle the isolation of self-mastery, so they break the seal, they start leaking again. They go back to the comfortable dysfunction of being an open, reactive, approval-seeking person, because at least that way they are not alone with their own mind. But if you can endure this stage, if you can sit in the discomfort of self-confrontation without fleeing back into the crowd, you unlock something that very few people ever access: true autonomy. You become the author of your own experience rather than a character in everyone else's story. The 9 behaviors we have dissected are not arbitrary social etiquette. They are the bars of a cage that you have been building around yourself. And each behavior you eliminate is a bar you remove. Silence about your plans protects your energy and your strategy. Restraint in complaining preserves your status and your internal narrative. Emotional regulation maintains your operational effectiveness. Eliminating unnecessary apologies reclaims your space. Financial privacy shields you from envy and contempt. Refusing to gossip builds trust and intelligence capital. Withholding your philosophy lets your life speak louder than your words. Rejecting validation seeking establishes autonomy. Guarding your vulnerabilities prevents exploitation. These are not tricks, they are disciplines, and disciplines require practice, repetition, and most of all, the willingness to be misunderstood in the short term for the sake of being undeniable in the long term.